For the first time this season, the Sacramento Kings should be embarrassed by their effort in their loss to the New York Knicks. First time this season, the Kings have failed to score triple digits. We'll talk about it on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season long. Today presented by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered with more odds, props, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10 News. Kings lose to the Knicks in Madison Square Garden, 112-99 tonight. Like I mentioned, this is the first time all season long that the Kings fail to score triple digits. But that's not the reason why, or the primary reason even why, the Kings should feel embarrassed by this performance. The Kings should overall feel embarrassed because they know, we know, and anyone who has watched more than really 15 minutes of Sacramento Kings basketball this season knows that the Kings as a team overall on both sides of the floor in all categories are a much better team than they showed in this game against the New York Knicks. Now, I have to make sure I give the Knicks credit because they did a ton of things right in this game, a ton of things right, including, first and foremost, I think, never really allowing the Sacramento Kings to get into any kind of rhythm or get into any kind of flow. I give some of that credit to Tom Thibodeau as a head coach. Every time the Kings seemed to put together a little bit of momentum, he was calling quick timeouts and shutting that down, just like Mike Brown calls quick timeouts when the Kings aren't doing things right. So that kind of halted Kings momentum before they could really get going. This game was a muddy game. Mark Jones said on the broadcast, and rightfully so, it was a game that was basically played in New York rush hour traffic. It's because it did not have any flow to it. There were a lot of foul calls. It was a lot of stop and go. And the Sacramento Kings, when they've really struggled this season, it's been because of physicality, and the New York Knicks brought a physicality that the Sacramento Kings could not handle in this game and really did not live up to at any point, whether it was defensively, whether it was their offensive flow, the passing, the communication across the board. The Sacramento Kings did not play their game tonight. The New York Knicks did a really good job forcing the Kings to try and play the Knicks brand of basketball, and that's why Sacramento had such a hard time really from start to finish in this game. I don't think it's an embarrassing loss and an embarrassing effort for the Kings on the level of what embarrassment was last season. It's not like the Kings should be hanging their heads or should be ashamed of how they were beaten by the New York Knicks, a team that I wouldn't necessarily consider better than the Sacramento Kings, but a team that has been playing better as of late and has at least a little bit of experience, maybe a little more experience than the Sacramento Kings do due to the fact that they made the playoffs just a couple of seasons ago. Julius Randle coming off of a All-Star appearance. And by the way, Julius Randle loves playing the Sacramento Kings because he had his career-high 46 points against the Kings in Sacramento in March of last season, earlier on this year. And he was well on his way to another career high tonight, scoring 27 points in the first half. What's crazy is he finished with 27 points for the game because he was ejected midway through the third quarter. And all I'm going to say about this situation before getting back to the Sacramento Kings, I'm a big fan of Julius Randle, although I know he has a temper. I know he has a hot head. He took exception to a non-foul call, got right in the face of one referee and demanded to get teed up. Did get teed up, proceeded to walk right into the face of another referee and got his second tee and got ejected. I don't know if he was overplaying the game that night, but he had to know that he was going to get ejected going up to that second referee. And what I want to know is why in the world somebody in a New York Knicks uniform didn't grab their guy and stop him and hold him back. Because you could tell as soon as he left that first rep made eye contact with that second ref and went right towards him. You could tell it was only going to end one way. I watched the whole thing play out on TV, and I turned to my colleague, Kevin John at the time, who was watching The Office with me, and I said, he's going to get thrown out of this game. Lo and behold, goes right to that second ref, clearly still agitated, clearly had something to say, and that something was more than enough to get him thrown out of the game. If that were happening to De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis, or any star player on the Sacramento Kings, I would be asking the same question. Why in the world didn't Harrison Barnes, why in the world didn't this player step out, step in front of him, and move him away? That's something you really see players and teammates do a lot to make sure that they don't do anything stupid and don't get tossed out of the game. Good thing for the New York Knicks is, at that time in the third quarter, everybody was starting to get going after Julius Randle really carried the Knicks in that first half. Jalen Brunson was getting going. R.J. Barrett was getting going. Barrett also finished with 27 points. So the Knicks were able to more than overcome Julius being ejected. But that's another example of a situation where maybe the Kings could have used that to take advantage and start to build some momentum. That is a very feasible moment where you could say, okay, this is where the game is going to change. The Kings are going to turn it around and build some momentum off of this moment. I think they scored 5 unanswered points before Julius was ejected. Instead, the New York Knicks responded to it. I think right after that ejection, they hit a big three and brought the lead back up to like 16, 17 points, and Sacramento didn't really get too much closer except for late in the fourth quarter. Speaking of which, Mike Brown decided to keep his starters in, not the entire starting lineup, but a lot of his starters in, including Domantas Sabonis. Harrison Barnes was out there late in this game. And he had the Kings up until the final seconds emphasizing a full court press, trying to cause turnovers and maybe get back in the game that way, but playing with a little more defensive intensity and defensive effort. Now, on one hand, I could look at that and say, first and foremost, where was this intensity and effort in this full court press? Why didn't you do this earlier in the fourth quarter? And the other thing that I could question is, hey, this is a losing game on the road. This is garbage time. Why would you risk an injury to a Domantas Sabonis or a Kevin Huerter or anybody when your best player in De'Aaron Fox is already sitting out for the second straight game? I understand those questions, especially the injury question. However, I personally was okay with Mike Brown doing that, keeping his starters in and incorporating full court press. To me, that was Mike Brown saying, I have a standard. We did not play up to the level that we are capable of and a level that we expect on either side of the floor, but in this case, defensively in this game. So I'm not going to let you have the rest of the night off and sit down and have the end of my bench come in so that they can finish out this mess that mainly you created. No, you're going to go out there and we're going to implement a full court press, even if it has very little outcome on the game, on the final score. There's a very small, minuscule chance of the Kings actually using that full court press to somehow close a nearly 20-point gap in 2 to 3 minutes. But we're still going to play with this energy. We're going to still play with this intensity. We're going to start learning lessons and incorporating changes now for Tuesday's game in Philly. And more importantly, you're going to work hard and finish out this game because you did not play to the level that I expect. We did not play to the level that everyone expects watching us play basketball in this game here tonight. Like, I appreciate that mindset from Mike Brown. Maybe I'm reading too far into it. Maybe that wasn't Mike's plan at all. Excuse me. Maybe he genuinely thought that the Kings still had a chance to work their way back into it late by incorporating a full court press. But to me, that was the message that was sent. That's how I interpreted that situation. Also, I talked about this a little bit after the Kings lost to the Phoenix Suns in Sacramento a couple of weeks ago. They threw a lot of double teams at Devin Booker in that game because Booker was going off. And I felt in that game that those double teams were slow and they kind of lacked purpose, and they were ultimately hurting the Kings more than they were helping the Kings. It was kind of the same thing in this game. I think the Kings double teams are horrendous, to be honest with you. The Kings double teams are really, really bad. They're slow. They lack an intensity. To me, if you're going to pull off a successful double team, you have to commit to it 110%, meaning that second guy to double team has to come in flying, try and steal the ball or cut off passing lanes, and everybody else who's not involved in the double team has to react accordingly and try and cover as much ground as they possibly can. When the Kings threw double teams at Julius Randle and R.J. Barrett, but especially Julius Randle at the top of the key, the double came slow. It was like, okay, they waited for their man to kind of get close to Julius, and then they kind of cheated over a little bit, and Julius just passed to the open man, and it was an easy bucket every single time. The Kings were getting killed defensively in this game by helping. They were trying to help. I thought the perimeter defense was a big letdown in this game, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when I talk about De'Aaron Fox's absence. But I thought the perimeter defense was bad. The rest of the defense had to scramble to try and make up for it, and the Knicks were doing a really good job passing around it, finding the open man, and most of the time finding the easy bucket, especially around the rim and in the paint. The Kings' help defense was getting torn to shreds all night long. So by implementing a slow double team, you essentially were helping more when you didn't have to, and allowing the Knicks, who have already been carving you up, more time to continue to carve you up. I didn't think it made any sense at all. If the Kings are going to start to incorporate double teams, they need to do a much better job in practice working on when to set or when to attack. Like if you wait for someone to put the ball on the floor, wait for them to get to a certain spot on the floor, and whoever is coming in to help double, make sure they come with a purpose, make sure they come with an intensity, and they commit to it 100%. Because if they don't, it's almost always going to result in an easy bucket or at the very least an open look for the opposing team. I thought the double teams for the Kings were dreadful in this game. Now let's talk about De'Aaron Fox's absence. Second game that De'Aaron Fox was out with his foot injury. Not going to go into the same conversation that I had during the Cleveland game, even though the Kings won that game. It's clear to me the Sacramento Kings are a significantly better basketball team when De'Aaron Fox is on the floor, and it's stupid that that's even a take. I mean, that's just common sense, in my opinion. But to me, what I want to talk about is De'Aaron Fox's presence. Because even when he is not star Fox, even when he's not scoring 30 points or breaking down a defense and getting to the rim at will or hitting a majority of his threes and is playing like the unstoppable De'Aaron Fox that we know he's capable of being. And the Kings, quite frankly, need him to be more, even if he is choosing to play hurt, which he was over the last couple weeks. Even if De'Aaron Fox is out there, and I said this before, playing at 50, 60, 70%, scoring 16 points instead of 30, first off, those 16 points are very important. Second off, the presence that De'Aaron plays with opens up opportunities, especially offensively, for his teammates. But we're also seeing the direct defensive impact that De'Aaron has incorporated this year that has improved the Kings' perimeter defense that has been missing, I would say, over both of these games that he's been out, but especially this game against the New York Knicks. I thought perimeter defense was dreadful for Sacramento. Davion Mitchell had some good moments, sure. Kevin Huerter had some moments, sure. For the most part, perimeter-wise, the Kings' defense was getting torn to shreds. That was allowing the New York Knicks to get as many open looks around the rim and score as effortlessly as they were, breaking down the Kings' help defense like we just talked about. I think De'Aaron Fox has become a leader perimeter defense-wise and has become a presence on the perimeter defense to where he's not a lockdown defender by any means. And it's not just him when the Kings are playing good perimeter defense. Of course, everybody typically gets involved in that. But the Kings have been able to lean on De'Aaron a little bit more for individual defensive matchups on the perimeter, and De'Aaron has been getting the best of those matchups to where they haven't needed to help nearly as much as they have for the most of De'Aaron's career coming into this season. His presence is missed there, but especially offensively, with everybody he's on the floor with. De'Aaron just being out there forces defenses to keep an eye on him. De'Aaron just being out there spaces the floor better, even if De'Aaron's not the shooter. There's such a threat of him attacking the basket that defenses have to collapse on that, giving more opportunities to shooters on the perimeter. And again, it doesn't take De'Aaron being a 30-plus point scorer every single night to bring that out. His reputation alone, how he can explode at any given moment, how he is turning into a three-level scorer in the NBA, that all plays an effect even if the ball isn't in his hands all the time. And he's done a better job at being that successful without having the ball in his hands all the time because of how much the Kings are playing through Domantas Sabonis this season. I don't think it's a coincidence at all, that Malik Monk is struggling over these last couple games. Malik Monk tonight was really bad. 12 points, 3 of 15 shooting from the field, 3 turnovers. He's looked like a shell of what he was the last couple of weeks when the Kings were playing some of the best basketball of the season and on that 3-game win streak. I'm not saying that De'Aaron Fox deserves all the credit for Malik Monk's success, but because of the way Mike Brown staggers De'Aaron's minutes, because he wants one of De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis on the floor at all times, Malik Monk has played a decent chunk of time. I have to look to see if it's a majority of the time, but it's certainly a good amount of time. Malik Monk has shared the floor with De'Aaron Fox. Because of De'Aaron's presence and how much that opens up for opportunities for Malik, we've seen him capitalize on that, whether it's in transition, on the perimeter, or attacking the basket. And I'm going to take it a step further. I think the Kings bench as a whole is struggling over these last two games because De'Aaron Fox is out. And some people might not be able to draw that connection. Some people might think De'Aaron Fox is a starter. Why would the bench struggle so much when De'Aaron is starting? Some people might think, oh, it's because one of the bench players had to go into the starting lineup to replace De'Aaron, which in this case is Davion Mitchell. That's not the case. Or at least that's not why the bench is struggling so much, in my opinion. Again, because of the staggered minutes, De'Aaron Fox is spending a lot of time playing with second-unit players. He's played a decent amount of minutes with Trey Lyles. He's played a lot of minutes with Malik Monk. He's played a decent amount of minutes with Chimezie Metu. The Kings bench has looked like a shell of themselves. Not even close to what they were over these last couple of games. As a bench tonight, they had 22 points. Again, Malik Monk had 12 of those 22. They shot 7 of 27 from the field. De'Aaron's presence is being missed with that second unit. It's being missed by Malik Monk. It's being missed by the Kings' offense and perimeter defense as a whole. And I don't think it's a surprise either that the Kings' assist numbers are down with De'Aaron Fox being out. Not just because De'Aaron Fox is one of the leaders on this team in assists. Domantas Sabonis is still that guy. But the ball movement is not as good without De'Aaron Fox out there. My point is, De'Aaron Fox just being on the floor has a clear effect on how the Sacramento Kings play basketball and what opportunities are available for his teammates. And that's been made abundantly clear by how the Kings are playing and how they're trying to not change everything they're doing, because for the most part, they're fundamentally still playing the same. But there are key differences to opportunities that the Kings now are not getting simply because De'Aaron Fox is not on the floor and is not available. And that, to me, shows the major drop-off between a 50% De'Aaron Fox playing and no De'Aaron Fox playing. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by a couple of fantastic sponsors, the first of which, NHTSA. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. It's common, it happens. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, it's fine. You live nearby, you can make it home okay. It's really no big deal. What are the odds that you get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So, if you think you're going to be okay to drive after a few drinks, think again, please. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks, the number one way to play daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy NBA. Instead of going through the hassle of managing lineups and having to deal with the disadvantage at times of your opponent's best players playing more in a week than your best players are playing. Prize Picks removes all of that hassle, all of that chaos, and gives you the most efficient way to play daily fantasy sports. The way it works, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will score more or less than their projected Prize Picks numbers, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes, of course, the NBA, the NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and more. No, I'm not kidding. You can bet on all of that and play all of that on Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They offer safe and fast withdrawals and are currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Right now, if you download the Prize Picks app and create an account, use our promo code LOCKEDON, and first-time users can receive a 100% instant match up to $100. So you deposit $100, you get $100 instantly. You deposit $50, you get $50 instantly. It's that easily. You're already making money just by creating an account. Don't forget to use promo code LOCKEDON to sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. On one hand, it's stupid to say, wow, there's a major drop-off between De'Aaron Fox and Davion Mitchell. No duh. On the other hand, I think it's fair to say we expected that gap or that drop-off to be less. I expected more, especially offensively, from Davion Mitchell. And while Davion had a few good offensive moments in this game and had a few good moments in the win over the Cavaliers, and of course defensively we know what Davion Mitchell brings to the table, I expected him to be more aggressive and more impactful for the Kings, especially with De'Aaron going down. That is where you really need to step up as the backup point guard. I'm going to be very careful here not to pick on Davion Mitchell because I don't think that's fair. I think Davion has a clear role with the Sacramento Kings, and defensively he plays that role really well and has had a number of really, really good, important defensive moments for the Sacramento Kings in a lot of wins so far this season. So he's not been dreadful this season by any means. But my question is it too early to call Davion's offensive outbursts at the end of last season? Remember when De'Aaron Fox was out, Domantas Sabonis was out, it was really the garbage time of another losing season, and Davion Mitchell offensively exploded onto the scene. Now he was also playing almost 40 points a night, or rather 40 minutes a night in those games. Is it fair or is it too early to call that a fluke? Because I have not seen at any point this season, 25 games in, I have not seen at any point that version of Davion Mitchell, that offensive output from Davion Mitchell. Haven't seen it. Maybe it's the Kings' offensive system. Maybe it's Mike Brown not asking him to do as much. Maybe, again, that was just a fluke, and Davion was just trying to take advantage of garbage time minutes at the end of a lost season. I don't know. I think the Kings need some, not all, especially in these games where De'Aaron Fox is out, they need some of that effort and that impact from Davion Mitchell. 7 points and taking only 5 shots in 25 minutes is not enough when you're replacing your best player. It's not enough. Davion needs to do more, and I appreciate the fact that Davion still tries to play within the flow of the Kings' offense, gets the ball to Domantas Sabonis a lot like he's supposed to. I know that he's not as much of a floor general playing with Sabonis as he is when he's playing by himself, or as he has to be when he's playing by himself. I get that. I need more than 5 shots. I need more than 7 points when De'Aaron Fox is not playing. Davion Mitchell, I almost said Donovan. Davion Mitchell was the only Kings starter, to not score double digits. It hurts. It does hurt. Now, speaking of Kings players playing double digits, I think it's been made clear now over these last couple of games, and it took a 19-0 run, remember, really, for the Sacramento Kings to defeat the Cleveland Cavaliers. For the most of that game, they struggled. I think it's clear that the team offensive, everybody get involved, a little bit here, a little bit there, output that has been working for the Sacramento Kings in the majority of their wins this season with De'Aaron Fox available is not going to work as well without De'Aaron Fox. Like, the Kings need other players to step up. Domantas Sabonis is doing the best that he can to step up. He had 20 points, 7 of 10 shooting from the field, 6 of 11 from the free throw line. That's not great. He did only take 10 field goals, but in reality, because he got to the line so many times, he was aggressive and tried. And those, if he misses a shot and goes to the line for 2 free throws, it doesn't count as a field goal. So he really had more than just 10 attempts to try and score. Also had 12 rebounds in this game. Like, Sabonis is stepping up and doing what he can, and yeah, the Kings would like more than 20 points out of Domantas Sabonis when De'Aaron Fox is missing, but the Kings had 5 players in double-figure scoring. They need either 8 players in double-figure scoring without De'Aaron Fox playing, which is a lot to ask, or they need 4 to 5 players in double-figure scoring with 2 of them at 25 plus. That's what this Kings team needs, really, to have a consistent chance of winning and to be as good as we know they can be offensively when De'Aaron Fox is out. And we haven't seen that yet. Now, Keegan Murray, I think, has been doing a great job of being more aggressive with De'Aaron Fox being out. This is his 7th straight double-digit game, so he's getting back into the flow of things. Had 18 points, 6 of 15 shooting. Not the greatest shooting percentage, of course, well under 50%. But I will say the aggressiveness and him having a higher amount of shots in a game where De'Aaron Fox is not playing, I welcome that. I'm okay with that. And if the shot's not falling as well as we would expect, but you still are putting together an 18-point performance with 7 rebounds and you're being aggressive when the Kings need you to be when they're shorthanded, I'll take that from Keegan. What I saw from Keegan in this game was what I need to see from more players with De'Aaron being out. A level of aggressiveness without going over the top. I saw aggressiveness from Malik Monk in this game, but I think Malik went a little over the top and got a little out of hand. In the Cleveland game, Chimezie Metu was trying to be aggressive, got a little over the top, got a little out of hand. There's a very big difference between being aggressive and out of control and being aggressive and in control. Keegan Murray, when he gets aggressive, for the most part, is in control, and I saw that in this game. I like what I saw out of Keegan. You, of course, could have used more offensively out of Keegan. Could have used more offensively out of everybody, and a few of those shots that he missed were wide-open looks. So, yeah, Keegan knocks those down. Maybe those Kings runs that got them to within 12, 13 points gets the Kings into single digits, and that changes the momentum of this game. Everybody needs to step up more. I'm just saying I like the aggressiveness that I saw out of Keegan in his 18-point performance. I forgot to mention this at the beginning. There is actually a silver lining of the Kings having their first embarrassing performance in tonight's game. And it's the fact that it took the Kings 25 games to have their first embarrassing performance. And I think back to the 0-4 start. No, the Kings didn't play well during that 0-4 start, of course, but we didn't necessarily know what that team was at that point, and they were figuring a lot of things out. So I don't ever remember feeling embarrassed or thinking the Kings should be embarrassed by the way they played because we didn't really know what they were yet. At this point, 25 games in, we have a pretty good idea of who the Sacramento Kings are, what kind of team they are. And they did not even come close to living up to that tonight. That's why I feel that they should be a bit embarrassed. Not overly embarrassed, not absolutely ashamed and should completely hang their heads and should be booed relentlessly. It was nothing nearly that bad. And we saw that bad last season. Nothing near that bad. I think a really healthy way of looking at it, and it was Frankie Cardicelli from Sacktown Sports 1140 and the Return of the Roar podcast that tweeted this out initially, and I really liked it. It took 25 games for the Kings to put together a pretty unwatchable performance. 25 games. And it's probably not going to be the last time this season that they have an unwatchable performance or a really ugly performance. Hopefully it is, but it probably won't be. But the fact that it took us this long. We got into mid-December. Is it mid-December or is it still early December? Close to mid-December, whatever it is. Got to December. We got 25 games into the season. The Sacramento Kings are still 3 games above 500 at 14-11, and they just now had their first embarrassing performance of the season. If that doesn't show you the growth from last year, I don't know what does. This episode of Locked On Kings is also brought to you by BetOnline. Like I told you at the start of the show, BetOnline is your #1 source for sports betting, info, stats, news, and analysis. They give you the latest odds and trends and the best odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. That includes football, basketball, soccer with the World Cup going on right now, even esports. If you're a nerd like myself and you like to watch competitive gaming, whether it's Apex Legends, which I really enjoy. I used to watch a lot of like League of Legends competitive. You can even bet on that on BetOnline. Of course, some of the best fun side prop bets, future bets, bets on NBA titles and things like that. Who's going to win a championship? You can bet on like Mike Brown winning Coach of the Year or Malik Monk winning Sixth Man of the Year. You can bet on all of that on BetOnline. They're the fastest and easiest way to get that betting fix in. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. If the rumors are true that Cam Reddish is available for just a second-round pick, or that the New York Knicks are seeking either a second-round pick or another young player on a rookie contract of a different position and skill set than Cam Reddish. If that really is how cheap Cam is in the trade market, the Sacramento Kings, who I believe have 4 second-round picks, give one of them, Monty. Give 2 of them. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Cam Reddish. I know his time in Atlanta was disappointing, and in New York, he's been nothing. Like, they've barely even used him. He's just kind of sat there for the last season and some change. Or maybe it's 2 seasons now. I don't even remember. Cam Reddish has done nothing in a New York Knicks jersey. I don't know how much of that is on Cam. I don't know how much of that is on Tom Thibodeau. But I do think Cam Reddish has some skills that the Sacramento Kings need, and he provides, if nothing else, glorious, glorious wing depth. Would he come to Sacramento and play for Mike Brown right away? I have no idea. But for 1 to 2 second-round picks to get him here in Sacramento, I'm game. Anyone else? Anyone not? Anyone think that's a waste of a second-round pick? I mean, I personally would pull the trigger on that. The Sacramento Kings are now 1-2 on this road trip so far. Still got plenty of time. However, Game 4 of this road trip on Tuesday is in Philly against the 76ers. The 76ers team that I think, for the most part, people would say they've been a little disappointing this season. Certainly not on the level of the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks in the East. But they're coming off of a win against the Charlotte Hornets where they put up 131 points. The Hornets, not the best, of course. However, Joel Embiid had 53 points in that game. Who the hell are the Kings going to use to shut down Joel Embiid? Not to mention James Harden being out there, although I think James Harden is overrated. But that's just me. I don't like this matchup for the Sacramento Kings too much, I'll be honest with you. But we'll see how the Kings fare, and we'll see if De'Aaron Fox is available or not in this game. You know, I was listening to the G-Man's radio broadcast during the first quarter of tonight's game while I was commuting here to the station, and G was talking about a conversation that he had with De'Aaron Fox, and De'Aaron kind of gave G a little bit of an update and mentioned that he apparently has like some fluid in his foot, and the training staff is trying to decide whether or not they want to like drain and get rid of that fluid or just let it be. So if any information comes out about that, I would sure be interested in hearing it. Hopefully De'Aaron is good to go on Tuesday because, like we've discussed in this podcast over and over again, his presence is extremely important, and the Kings are going to need that presence, I think, if they want to have a good chance of walking out of Philly with a victory. But Kings Sixers on Tuesday, of course, we'll have an episode of Locked On Kings following that game, no matter the result. And on tomorrow's Locked On Kings podcast, I'm going to do something that I haven't done in a long time. That's a Kings mailbag. Haven't done a mailbag episode for a long time. So send me your Sacramento Kings questions. For those of you who are listening on YouTube, just type those questions in the comment section down below, if you wouldn't mind putting it at the top for the Kings mailbag or Kings mailbag question or something, so I can track them easily. I'll collect as many as I can answer, or a handful of them, and we'll answer them. If you're an audio listener, or if you would just prefer to submit them to me on Twitter, I'm going to tweet out that I'm accepting them a little bit later on this evening. Just respond to that tweet, or you can DM me your question for the mailbag episode if you'd like. You can also send me an email with your question if you're not on Twitter. mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. But I look forward to answering as many of your Kings questions as I can tomorrow. And then, of course, like I mentioned, Kings and 76ers post-game pod on Tuesday. Really appreciate your support, as always. If you could really quickly leave a review of Locked On Kings on Apple Podcasts, it's the best place to do it. It gets the most traction, gets the most eyes. Hit 5 stars. There's also a little custom box where you can put your own review in your own words. If you could do that too, that really helps us out. If you have any constructive criticism for the podcast, of course you can put it there. You could put in there why you like the podcast, why you'd encourage others, Kings fans or just NBA fans, to listen to the podcast. If you're a Spotify listener, there's no custom box, but you can hit 5 stars. I really would appreciate that. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, hit that notification bell, hit thumbs up. All that great stuff really, really helps us out too. Thank you again for your support. Can't wait to have you join me on tomorrow's mailbag episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.